Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Bold, Beautiful Borderline podcast. I'm your host, Sarah, and I have my husband with me today, who is
Yeah.
frequently a co-host or guest on this podcast.
Yeah. Am I a co-host or a guest at this point?
You will never be given the title of co-host, but you are a guest.
Yeah.
A guest co-host.
A guest co-host.
Yes.
I like that. I like that.
So it has been an interesting couple of weeks in this country. And I thought, what better time? This cat is eating my Monstera. And I'm about to have a borderline meltdown if he fucks with my plan. We're taking a pause.
Let's see if he'll stay on my shoulder.
I have a cat trying to ruin my life right now. So if you can hear purrs in the background, that's better than the whining that you would hear if he was at the door. So it's been a wild couple of weeks in this country, and I personally have been not dealing and coping and not coping and kind of like on the roller coaster ride that is living in the States right now, regardless of if you're mentally ill or have borderline and are generally on a roller coaster ride. You're probably riding that wave right now. If you're on the far left like me, you've felt a variety of emotions, but honestly, I think people in the center and even people who are leaning to the right are feeling like there's been a lot happening in a very short amount of time. And, I want to acknowledge that could be causing a lot of anxiety for many, many people. But for us, especially us in the borderline community, that could be leaving us feeling unsafe. And so I just want to remind y'all, do what it is that you need to do to stay safe. And at the end of this episode, I am going to read some strategies and ideas given to us by our BPD community. But this episode couldn't come at a better time. It is all about what is gaslighting. What is gaslighting? That is the episode. Before we get started, I have a little clip from The West Wing, good old Martin Sheen, that I think would be fun to play to get us started. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right, let's do it.
Sexuality an abomination.
I don't say homosexuality is an abomination, Mr. President. The Bible does.
Yes, it does. Leviticus
22.
chapter and verse. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions while I had you here. I'm interested in selling my youngest daughter into slavery as sanctioned in Exodus 21:7. She's a Georgetown sophomore, speaks fluent Italian, always cleared the table when it was her turn. What would a good price for her be? While thinking about that, can I ask another? My chief of staff, Leo McGarry, insists on working on the Sabbath. Exodus 35:2 clearly says he should be put to death. Am I morally obligated to kill him myself, or is it okay to call the police? Here's one that's really important, because we've got a lot of sports fans in this town. Touching the skin of a dead pig makes one unclean, Leviticus 11:7. If they promise to wear gloves, can the Washington Redskins still play football? Can Notre Dame? Can West Point? Does the whole town really have to be together to stone my brother John for planting different crops side by side? Can I burn my mother in a small family gathering for wearing garments made from two different threads? Think about those questions, would you? One last thing. While you may be mistaking this for your monthly meeting of the Ignorant Tight-Ass Club, in this building, when the president stands, nobody sits.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why do you think I played that?
Well, I think you played that because you want to talk about how citing scripture can and does feel like gaslighting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. That's why.
Do you remember, I don't know, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, we were at dinner at my parents' house. I can't remember what for. My grandparents were there. They're Mormon. My grandparents were wonderful to us growing up. And they struggled when my brother and I came out. They really struggled when I married my ex-wife. Story for another day. I really believe that they are good people, and I believe that their values are not good. And the way in which they live their values are very flawed. But we were sitting at dinner, and my grandmother was telling a story about a long time ago, many, 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 many years ago, 60 years ago. Her ex-husband was arrested for beating the shit out of a gay person.
Yep.
And I was sitting there like, okay, well, what do I do in this moment? I was like, and I was the only person at the table that made any kind of real stand because I can't not, and I shouldn't not. And I said, good, like good. He should be.
Yeah, he should have gone to jail.
He should have gone to jail. And she was like, I had a small child at home. He should have gotten out of jail. And I think I got up from the table and walked away and just made my peace. And thank God I stayed sober in that moment. But I reflect back now and I think I wish I would have asked her, what would you have done if I was the person that got the shit beat out of me? Or if my brother was the person that got the shit beat out of him?
I think it's interesting that her point was, I had a young child at home and I had to do all that by myself. And it's like, that is the point, but the answer to like that whole conundrum isn't, oh, well, he should have not gone to jail. It's he should have not beat the shit out of that person.
He should have not beat the shit out of that person for being gay.
Right. So it's interesting that like that moment, he chose a misguided belief over taking care of his family. That was more important. That was more important than taking care of his family.
Yeah.
So it's like, what, like, is that a good person? Is that a good man? Is that a good Christian who chose to beat up somebody instead of like take care of his family or take care of somebody or love his neighbor? Like, is that, so it never made her question like, oh, are these beliefs harmful? It was, oh, he should have just not got punished for hurting somebody.
Well, and maybe it wasn't even he shouldn't have gotten punished for hurting somebody. It was just the concept of him hurting someone didn't matter because it made her ability to raise this small child she had at home harder.
Right. Yeah.
And to me, this is a very good example of what I feel like is gaslighting. The Bible specifically is often used as a reason for us to oppress many different groups of people. Has historically, has always started wars, whatever. And there's that dichotomy. There's the dialectic of two things can be true at once. Religion and beliefs and values that can be taught in religious communities are very beautiful. And when we take some of these like teachings and these stories literally, then they can be very harmful. And I mean, how do you see this as one, relevant to what's happening in this country, and two, an experience of gaslighting? And I think the borderline experience has been, I don't think there's a single person with borderline who would say that they haven't felt gaslit. Whether or not that was the intention of the other person who did the gaslighting, we never know. But it's the perception of being gaslit and the harmfulness that comes from that.
Right. Well, I think so many people maybe don't fully understand what gaslighting is.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it.
Yep, we'll talk about that. But I think we all can comprehend and can relate to the feeling of like not being heard, having like our sequence of events questioned. I think we all can relate to people downplaying our big emotions, or people, using our experiences against us. Anything,
especially our behavior against us.
Yeah, especially your behavior, like, oh, like that, like you didn't need to do that, that's ridiculous, blah blah blah. So I think that like the larger,
this fucking cat, man,
here we go. Okay. I think the larger your emotional reactions to things are, I think you have a higher chance of people wanting to like, metaphorically shush you. Now, is all of that gaslighting? By definition, probably technically not. Some of it is, yeah, sure. Depending on intent. But I think it creates a similar feeling of like this questioning your own reality, wondering if like, oh, maybe I am just being dramatic. Maybe that didn't happen that way. So I think the result is the same, but does all of that deserve a gaslighting label? Some yes, I'm sure, and then some no. I do think that
I think gaslighting can be very like, it's a tricky, it's a, what's the word? It's a slippery slope, right? Of like, okay, well, on the one hand, gaslighting can occur because a person doesn't want to acknowledge the impact of their behavior. But then on the receiving end, we can say or feel like we're being gaslit because we don't want to acknowledge the impact of our behavior on another person.
Totally.
And so like gaslighting really is born from, one, a lack of insight, but two, true gaslighting is the intent to harm emotionally.
Yes. Like intentional, to the definition, gaslighting is on purpose. Like it is 100%. That person knows what they're doing. And that person is intending to make the person they're doing it to question their reality for whatever purpose. I think unintentional gaslighting or unintentional behaviors that mirror gaslighting or create a feeling of being gaslit, they're not the same category. And I think, like, you're right. Gaslighting, the word, is a slippery slope. I think it's a pop psychology word. I think it's a buzzword. People are just like, yeah. And they're lacking, again, nuance, context, and an application. You know, they see something or they hear something and they're like, oh my God, yeah, that person did that to me. And it's like, whoa, like in this instance, intent
Yeah. Intent is
important.
Intent is what truly differentiates between feeling gaslit and being gaslit. And that is also like the lifelong borderline struggle of being told you're manipulating.
Right.
99% of the time, there is not an inherent desire to harm or manipulate.
Right.
The behavior presents that way. Yes, absolutely.
Totally.
I have done some things that has made people feel hella manipulated. But I can't remember a single time where I thought, I'm going to twist this narrative because I want them to hurt.
Right.
It's like, no, I'm trying to, like, looking back, I can see I'm trying to twist a scenario so that I don't have to feel any more hurt.
Right. And
because I don't think I can live through any more hurt.
Right. And I love that you said, like, maybe we say we're being gaslit, or we say we're being gaslit to avoid how we made somebody feel.
Yeah.
I like that. It's so much easier to be like, you're gaslighting me, than to look and be like, my emotional outburst or my sudden flip to anger and said some evil ass shit to you about maybe something that was small in the moment. Like, it's so much easier to be like, you're gaslighting me to justify your own shitty behavior.
Yeah.
Because it's uncomfortable to be like, I just hurt you.
Well, and it's hard to differentiate also between gaslighting, manipulating, and lying, right? And how different are those things? You know, I don't know, but I can think back to being younger and, you know, men or teenage boys that I was like having sex with, making me feel like they liked me or they were attracted to me because they wanted to have sex with me.
Right.
Or using alcohol as a way to
lower your defenses.
Lower my defenses. And, you know, and it's all tricky where consent is concerned, but like I consented to most of those, right? Because
Sure.
like I felt like they liked me or they thought I was pretty or I just wanted the dopamine or whatever. But when you look at it, it's like, okay, well, all of that is very ethically messy. And then what's the end result of that? I absolutely turned off any emotional connection to sex and was able to just be like,
yeah,
I don't give a shit. I'm going to have sex with anyone and everyone anywhere.
Right. Well, I think, small tangent, when it comes to hindsight and consent, hindsight is 100% 2020 always. Yeah. And so we, like, when we're looking back at young us and we consented, that's fine. We consented to things that maybe older us would not have consented to. That's fine.
Yeah.
We still have to own the fact that, like, I consented to that and maybe I wouldn't do that now. Like, you know what I mean? So, like, it's morally ambiguous and it is messy.
Yeah.
And, like, for me anyway, I consented to a few things that maybe I wouldn't have consented to now. Right?
Oh my God, there's so many things I consented to at the time that I wouldn't consent to now.
Right. And looking back, I don't blame the other person in that situation. I consented. Mm-hmm. I put myself in some precarious situations. When I
and you can blame people for being shitty, but not necessarily blame them for the outcome, like the way that it impacted you.
Right.
But when I think about like gaslighting, and you know what, let's read the definition because I brought it up.
You want me to read it?
Do you want to read it?
Well, I just offered. I'm trying to be helpful.
Gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation in which a person or group makes someone question their own reality, memory, or perceptions. It often involves denial, contradiction, and misdirection to create confusion and undermine the victim's confidence in their own thoughts and feelings. I hate the word victim, but I get it. And we're going to talk about some of the different ways that people do gaslight. But when we read this definition, there is one clear example in my life that I can say for certain 100% is gaslighting. Can you guess?
No, I don't think so.
Our living scenario from absolute hell.
Oh,
It wasn't even my ex-wife. It wasn't even any, whoever, whatever. It's that living situation when we were saying these things are happening and they are unsafe and unfair. And they were telling us
No.
they're not, and you chose to be here.
Yeah.
And it's well, yeah, we did choose to be here, but not when you're gonna let my dog out of the backyard and end up 3 blocks over, or not when you're gonna lock us out of the house, or not when you're gonna lock us out of the laundry. No, that's not what we agreed to or what we chose. That was gaslighting.
Yes.
And also it created one person was the cause of this, but then 3 people doubled down because they didn't like the way in which I was speaking back. So, well, that's where it becomes it's easier to gaslight when you have a group rather than one person. And, direct example of what's happening in this country, right?
Yeah, or cults. Cults are a great example of that, I think, which ties back into your using religious scripture as maybe a form of gaslighting. Full circle.
I think that this is so damaging to people with BPD because we will often fawn. We'll fight or we'll fawn, right? Okay, well, if this is what you're telling me this is, then I must be wrong. And if I'm wrong, then you'll still love me.
Mhm.
And that's why, people with serious mental illnesses actually are often more likely to be roped into a cult.
Yeah, I know you don't like the word victim, but they're more vulnerable.
Well, that's a victim.
Yeah, people are more vulnerable when maybe they got other stuff going on in their brains, right? And I think it's important to point out that you can have severe or whatever, however many mental illnesses, and you can be a perpetrator. So it's it goes back to that duality of 2 things can be true at once. You can do things that you didn't mean for them to be like that, but they were like that because that's how they were perceived. There's so many layers in being human.
So harmful, though.
Yeah, 100%.
So harmful.
Super harmful, and it sucks,
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's also problematic is people with borderline will often, be kind of hypervigilant and socially hyper aware and looking for what is danger. And so it's easy to find yourself obsessing over, are these things happening to me?
Yeah, you get stuck in analyzing the things that are happening, so you're never actually fully experiencing anything because you're stuck and you're looking for patterns. And you're oh, well, this thing felt like this, so this must be that, and that was bad, so this must be bad. Whereas it's and that's the survival instinct, right? That's
An attempt to stay safe.
Yeah, that's our a basic human instinct is trying to stay safe by being suspicious of things that we perceive as dangerous, right? So
This is why alcohol was my favorite drug.
Yeah, because it turned your brain off.
It turned it off.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it's well, I'm going to feel so much shame tomorrow anyways because I'm going to be hungover, sleeping in my vomit, or I spent $200 at the bar last night. So that shame, I don't even have to think about the shame of what people may or may not have done to me because they don't like me and I'm a piece of shit, right? Because these other things are coming first. And so alcohol was a great distraction for me in that.
Alcohol was nice too, in that everything was fuzzy around the edges. So you're was that interaction shitty? Or am I don't really remember, so I'm going to go with no.
No, they loved me.
It was great.
I'm a part of the group.
Did I make an ass of myself? Nah, no one said that. It's so much easier because everything's fuzzy, and it's oh, you have this warm, fuzzy memory, and that's not the memory created from the interactions or whatever you were having. That's the memory created by alcohol in your body.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I remember this exact scenario. I was you remember in the summer how they used to like shut down all the streets in Chinatown? So like in front of CC's, there'd be like a couple of blocks where everything's shut down, the cars can't drive.
It'd be walkable.
Yeah, but like walkable over to the barrel room and all of that.
Yeah, you could do like a little bar crawl basically.
Yeah, and end up at the pizza window. Anyways, but I had been in CC's when there was that shooting, and so fucking 15 of us sprinted and piled up in a fucking broom closet, and it was the worst moment of my life because like it wasn't the worst moment of my life. There's that borderline, but I wasn't speaking to my parents at the time, and I remember ending up in this broom closet, and like this girl was freaking out, and I was like having her breathe, and I remember being in there and having like 6 bodies on top of me, and I remember thinking my mom, like if this is the end of my life, like I didn't get to tell my mom I love her, and I'm sorry. Anyways, whatever. So but there was that trauma associated with going out, but of course that didn't stop me from going out. And I mean there's a ton of gun violence downtown. But so I was sitting at one of the picnic tables that they set up, and I was smoking, and there was these kids, and then there was this really loud, what sounded to me like a gunshot, and I freaked out for a second, and I was like, oh my God, that was a gunshot, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, no, it wasn't. That was a backfire of a car. And I was like, no, it was. Like, I was so drunk. And I remember the next day reflecting on it and being like, I was sitting around a table of 5 people, like convinced that this was a gunshot, and they knew it was a car backfiring. And like, I wasn't even realizing that they were like laughing at me and thinking I was stupid,
Yeah.
Just that awful, terrible moment. And they weren't gaslighting me, but
No.
just like,
But you didn't know.
I didn't know that I was like socially the one that was wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And like that they were like, oh my God, who is this fucking drunk bitch?
Yeah. Yeah. And like the thing about that is like, right, we've all been that drunk bitch. Right. And like,
I mean, hopefully not everyone listening.
Well, yeah, hopefully, fuck, because there's nothing worse than waking up and being like, oh my God, I was that drunk bitch last night. I include myself in that drunk bitch category because, it happens, but it sucks.
Yeah.
Sucks. I'm so glad I don't fucking drink anymore.
I know. Being sober is the best. Now you just get a feel when you're being gaslit.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're lucky, whereas me, I am always like, what is happening?
Oh, yeah, that's the autism.
I'm always so confused. I'm just like,
yeah.
Yeah, like I like you can like remember specific times in your life, I'm sure, where you felt like you were being gaslit. I don't. Like I'm sure I have been.
Well, yeah, you were in that when we were moving.
I know.
You knew you were being gaslit then.
But now looking back, I'm like the feeling in the moment was like, oh yeah, this is super fucked up. But like once I'm out of a situation.
Oh, you spent like a year like questioning yourself of, was that my fault? Yep. Did I lose these friendships because it really was me?
Yep.
Like maybe it wasn't that big of a deal that they, like
I was gaslighting myself.
That they locked us out. Honestly, I really think the only reason that you realized and understood was when Nova got out.
Yeah.
Like when they left the fence completely open, even though they knew Nova was in the backyard.
Yeah.
And I was nowhere to be found. Like I was inside.
Yeah.
Like I think that was the only reason.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was like very obvious to me. Like subtle things I don't always pick up on.
Because it was the first time they'd ever done that.
Yeah. And like for me, again, I'll just like throughout my life, like if I like, I don't always pick up on stuff unless it's very obvious, because I would say that like I gaslight myself. I talk myself out of like my own experiences. Nobody needs to fucking gaslight me. I'm already doing it. I'm like, am I? Did I?
That's such a trauma response to gaslighting yourself, because it's like, okay, well, if I can find all of the reasons why my feelings are wrong and I'm the one that fucked up, then I don't have to face another feeling of rejection that like once again, people don't accept me, or once again, people don't love me or want me to hurt, or, like that. And then that's a normal human experience, but then that when you have BPD or PTSD or whatever it is, that becomes incredibly dangerous. Crazy higher rates of self-harm, SI, isolation. I mean, I am finally like confident that I've built one friend here. Like I have like a girlfriend who was like, hey, can I come over and hang out and have coffee? And I was like, okay, what do we do?
But you did it.
But I did it,
Yeah.
you know?
And you had a good time.
And I had a good time, but like it took me years to get to a place where I felt like one, someone could love me enough to do that or like me enough to do that and want to spend time with me. And then two, that I could be the person that I would want me to be for other people to spend time around me.
Yeah.
You know, like years of isolating myself because of the behavior of others and the behavior of myself.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I want to comment on like what a big deal it is that you let yourself do that. Like, yeah, wanting to be the person that other people want to spend time around. Yeah, great. Finding somebody who wants to spend time around you. Absolutely. You had those too, but you like let yourself do that. You were like, yeah, come over. Like,
yeah, I would have never asked her.
No, but like you let it happen. That's like a big fucking deal. And like, I don't know, with
And then she asked again.
Yeah.
She's coming over on the 8th.
Yeah, see? And like with you, it's like we're re-socializing you.
Truly.
And you haven't done it in so long. So like, you know, this is a big deal, I think, personally.
Well, and I think like for me, once I got like fully properly medicated, which I finally am, and have removed people from my life that left me questioning myself and my skills and my abilities, and people that didn't have grace for me and didn't want to like do the work and learn with me, like now that leaves opportunity to only have relationships with people who have those skills.
It's been very cool to watch, by the way.
Thank you. Okay, let's talk about the tactics of gaslighting.
Yes.
We've kind of we've mentioned them, but like in official terms.
Yep.
So the first is denying that something happened.
That never happened.
Yeah.
That's not what happened. Like
Right.
that didn't happen.
That is not what happened. So that's the first. The second is trivializing your feelings.
You're overreacting. Another personal favorite is, why are you getting so upset? This isn't that big of a deal. I also will couple in there, I was just joking. You can't take a joke. I heard that one a lot as a kid. And as an early adult, you're too sensitive. I was just kidding.
That's the number one thing I'm sure people with borderline have heard their whole life. Why are you being so dramatic? And it's like, okay, I understand that you think this is dramatic, and there are certainly times that I can be dramatic, like yesterday.
You want to tell
Thank God I can laugh about it now. But most of the time, there's not the intention of being dramatic. There is no, to me, this really is that big of a fucking deal.
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah.
You know, like I remember growing up, like that was such a thing in my household. My parents are both my father's very flat in his affect. And my mom is very, very, very emotional and sensitive like I am, but she internalizes it. So it's very quiet. And for them, I was too much. It was too overwhelming to them. My emotions were too big. They didn't know how to cope with it. And so, yeah, I did hear that. You've been at my house when my mom has said, like, you're overwhelming me. This is too much.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, like, hearing that as a kid versus hearing that as an adult who's outside of that family circle, right, is so different. Like, as kids, we hear things that our parents are saying, and maybe it's like a flippant, offhanded thing, but to you, it's the biggest thing in the whole world, you know? And that, I think, is a universal experience for all kids, I think. And I think it's intensely magnified when you have like a neurodivergent kid or like or a really sensitive fucking kid, you know? Like, and I'm not saying that parents can't just say shit, because we're human, and like I do think kids need to hear things. Like sometimes you do need to tell your kid what's up.
Well, and I don't think that it was used in a gaslighting way. I
No.
think that it was just literally my parents didn't know how to cope with me.
Yeah. Well, and I think it was your, like, so, like, we'll use your mom as the example, right? Like, I think her saying, like, you are overwhelming me, this is too much. When I hear that or have heard that, I have never taken that as, like, baby Sarah took that, which is, I'm too much. I'm the problem.
Right.
What I'm hearing is, I don't have the emotional capacity to help you manage your large emotions because mine are too big.
She was overwhelmed.
I am hearing my cup overflow.
Yeah.
Like, I can't hold any more for you, and I want to because I love you.
I know that my mother would have done anything in the world to be able to hold it.
Oh yeah, she would have.
And she just couldn't.
No. I mean,
you just can't.
Who,
I mean, can you imagine me, a tiny little human with like no frontal lobe functioning and the most fucking impulsive and the most opinionated?
I can't.
I was wild.
You were a terror.
I was wild.
You were a terror.
Okay.
So sweet.
The next one is contradicting evidence. So you're remembering it wrong, quote unquote.
You're remembering it wrong. That's not how it happened. This is what happened. I think like even giving like your account of things as fact can be that way instead of saying like, that's not how I remember it. This is what I'm remembering. It's no, like asserting.
That's not what happened.
Yep, asserting that like your viewpoint is the correct one.
Yeah.
And that all dials back into like perception and intent versus impact. Like just because you didn't mean it doesn't mean that it wasn't felt, right? So like I don't count like in this, I think a lot of people like when they hurt someone's feelings, they're like, that's not how I meant it. That's not gaslighting.
That's not gaslighting.
That's like trying to clarify intent to minimize impact. And I think it's important, like when we're in an argument, to if someone is saying, that's not how I meant that, that's not what I meant, don't, as much as one would like to be like, oh fuck you, you're gaslighting me because you don't want to talk about it anymore. That's not what's happening.
Yeah.
They're trying to clarify intent. And that is when you can turn around and say my most favorite thing, which is intent does not minimize impact and you hurt me. Like, box it up.
In my previous marriage, when my ex-wife signed on full-time to be a crisis negotiator, which is a 24/7, 365 on-call position. It was brutal.
Yeah.
It was brutal. The amount of things that my ex-wife saw.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, and I'm not pro-police. Fuck that. But I feel for the things that she saw. Just like I feel for myself with the things that I've seen in my career. But anyways, so she loved it. She wanted to do it. Awesome. Great. Okay. Yes, we can do it. Great. And then, I don't know, a couple months later, I learned that the contract was a 6-year contract. And I was like, wait, what? I mean, I still don't sleep well, right? Yeah. She used to get that fucking beeper would go off in the middle of the night, get out of bed and leave, or have to leave something fun we were doing on the weekend, or miss important things in my life because of being on call. And I remember being like, you didn't fucking tell me that this was 6 years, dude. And she was like, yes, I did. And it's like, okay, well, I don't remember that.
Right.
I mean, maybe you did, but I didn't know I was neurodivergent at the time and had like a terrible working memory. But like, you obviously didn't have this conversation with me enough for me to understand that that's what was happening.
Right.
It's like, that's kind of like that contradicting evidence. And that's like one of the only times I can think of my ex-wife engaging in any behavior that was gaslighting to me, like truly gaslighting. Like, no, dude, I don't fucking remember that. I didn't fucking know that because 6 years is a long time. You would think that I would have known that.
Yeah, the number 6, like
6 years. I was 25 years old at the time. We would have just now been getting out of that contract.
That's a long time.
That's a long time.
That's a long time for that level of.
It required that same level of communication and expectation setting with your wife. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, next one, shifting blame. We kind of talked about this. If you weren't so sensitive, this wouldn't be a problem, quote unquote.
Like, this is your fault this happened.
or everything's so big to you.
Right. Or like, well, if you hadn't done this, I wouldn't have had to go do that. That is
Right.
a really good example of like, yeah, shifting blame or like justifying your own actions because of somebody else's actions. Like, well, you made me do this because you did this. It's like,
Mhm.
no, motherfucker, no.
I think a really common one for this with people with BPD, and it's so complex because it's true and not true all at once, is, well, if you would have just taken your fucking medications, then things wouldn't be like this.
Well, we know that is true and not true.
That's the thing,
because
it's true and not true.
sometimes you can take meds and have a really fucking shitty day.
Well, yeah, and it's like, okay, maybe all those years I should have been taking those prescribed medications, but like,
Yeah.
who was there talking to me about why I wasn't, and who was problem solving it with me? You know, like, there's so much internalized stigma that happens with medication.
Yeah.
Like, you can't be mad at someone for not taking medication if you're not helping them work through why they're not. And that is the responsibility of a partner who signs up to be with someone with borderline.
Yeah.
You cannot demonize someone for not taking their medication if you don't want to be a part of the treatment planning process and be on the fucking team, dude.
I agree. You know, like, I also don't like the like, well, if you had taken your medication, it wouldn't be like this. It's like, well, okay, that's like a moot point, right? Because I didn't, and now we're here.
Well, and
we
also
don't-
like, yeah, like I've not missed a single dose of my medication in quite a bit now. And if I do, it's only because of pharmacy issues.
Yeah.
And yesterday I still lost my fucking shit bad to the point that Talon had to come home from work and fix what was wrong for me. And he came through the door and I was like, do you have a fucking vape for me? And he was like, no. And I was like, I told you not to come home unless you have a fucking vape for me. You know, and then, but the second that he walked through the door,
Again.
the second time he walked through the door
'Cause
after fixing the thing that I needed him to fix, we both just started busting up laughing because it had been enough time and I had the confidence that the issue was going to be fixed that I just was able to be like, oh my God, Sarah, you nuthead.
Yeah, it was fucking hysterical. In the moment, it was not hysterical. I was very irritated with you, but we got there. It was fine. And like when I came home the first time, I did not come home with a vape.
Which was the agreement.
Right. And I was like, no, I'm not fucking doing that. I'm going to fix the issue.
And then I was like, you need to go out and get a vape.
And
Yeah, I specifically said, do not come home to fix this until you have nicotine for me.
Yep. And I was like, no, I'm going to come home. I'm going to fix it. And then I will go get your vape. Because, like, first of all, you don't get to tell me what to do. You're not the boss of me.
I mean, yeah, I am and I'm not.
Yeah, right. And secondly, like, me getting you a vape, that's not fixing the issue we're having. We need to fix the issue first, and then we can have our treat after. Okay?
I mean, I think it was fixing the issue at first because I am addicted to nicotine.
Yes, but to me, it was prolonging the issue because, okay, like, the vape doesn't fix the problem, which is the problem. She lost her phone, which has her debit card on it because her debit card is missing right now. We can't find the debit card.
I couldn't go buy a vape because my phone was lost and I'm walking around the neighborhood with my MacBook trying to like set the alarm on it. It's just so stupid.
Yeah.
Anyways, whatever. But the point of this story is that, you know, you can be properly medicated and still have these, I mean, for me, it was an outburst.
Yeah.
But whatever people want to call it.
Yeah. Yeah, you totally can. So.
Okay, and then the last one is rewriting history. I never said that. You're imagining things.
Okay, that's kind of like denying. That's almost like denying something happened. I think like rewriting history, that's so close to denying something happened, but I think that nuance is important, right? Like, I think it's important that we're listening to what people are saying to us, right? Like, because like, because I have said to you, I didn't say that.
Right. And I have distorted it in my head.
Right. And so like
that probably can feel like gaslighting to you when I freak out because I perceive something one way.
Right. And so like, and in my head, I know, like, so you saying like, oh, well, you just said this. In my head, I'm like, I didn't say that. I know you're not trying to gaslight me. I know that like what I said went into your brain, went through the BPD filter and came out your fucking mouth, and it is not what it's like telephone. It's like a bad game of telephone, right? So you'll say something to me and I'm like, whoa, lady, that is not what I said. And you're like, well, that's what you meant. And I'm like, there it is. There it is. She thought that I meant something by saying something. When we know that generally speaking, I don't have a double meaning behind what I say. I just say what I say and that's what it means.
That's what's so wild about trauma. Like it's
Doesn't matter.
my guess is that people who don't have the amount of trauma and difficulty with discernment that can happen with BPD, like people must just have like straightforward conversations. Oh, that's not what you said. I'm sorry, I misheard it.
Oh, my bad.
I
Yeah, you're right.
I don't feel as bad anymore. I love you. Let's go get coffee.
Yeah, I'm sure people do that.
And that's not how it happens.
No. I will say
for
though
me.
that like you and anyone with BPD, like hearing something and then their brain being mean and filtering it, and then you print out the thing that you thought you heard. I don't think like
It's like when the printer malfunctions and you want to throw it out the fucking window.
yeah, and then it prints and you're like, that's not what I wanted you to print. That
Or you
also,
run out of ink.
yeah, that's also like I think something I've experienced with neurotypical people who are like, I'll say something and they're like, they think I mean something else, and I'm like, no, I just mean what I said.
Yeah.
And so that like having no double meaning or not having to read in between the lines, I think is like socially we're programmed to be reading in between the lines because I think a lot of people say something and they mean something else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like very confused. But I just wanted to say that's not like solely a BPD thing, so I don't want people to feel bad if they're like, oh yeah, I do distort stuff. I think a lot of people do, especially when you're in an argument, you're in a high stress situation. I read this book and it was talking about the way in which super brutal trauma impacts our memory and our perception of like time and like facts, like actual indisputable facts. Like he was wearing a blue shirt. No, the person next to you was. The person in front of you was wearing a black shirt, right? Like, so it's like the way in.
But it's not the actual incident.
No.
But it's like the context or the factors surrounding
the details, like how details kind of get like Rubik's cubed up and you can't get them to line back up. You have the full event, but the little details in the event are a little skewed. So that's why they always say like, oh, we need to interview the victims as soon as possible before shit gets all wonky in their brain.
Yeah.
Like trauma does that to you. And, being in a high stress situation, like arguing with your partner, as much as that sounds silly, that is a high stress situation. That's stress within your home, right? So like that can create this larger possibility of mishearing, like misinterpreting,
Yeah.
and distorting what the other person said, I think.
I do think that it's very important for people who listen to this podcast that don't have BPD and are family or friends and are trying to learn. Like, we are not intentionally distorting the experience with you, or we're not intentionally like trying to find the bad, the one bad nugget or whatever in the thing that you say. It's when you've experienced so much trauma and your brain is wired to look for risk and danger and harm, that's all you can see sometimes. And you don't see it because you want it. You see it because, oh, if it's there, then I can run to avoid it, or I can fight to avoid it, or I can do something that will prevent me from experiencing the hurt that we experience as little kids.
I also think goes back to like the fractured like mirror, like the self-image thing.
Mhm.
Like I think that it's so hard to hear somebody say something to you and take that for what it is when you have a self-image that is not whole.
Right.
And that is something innate to like people with BPD, right? Like you guys don't have a whole self-image. It's fractured, it's fragmented. And so like, when you have somebody with you all the time, like you reflect back. Like, so like I never take the things that you're distorting, like things I've said that you're distorting. I don't take that as you attacking me or trying to gaslight me. I take that as that's the reflection off of you.
Right.
Like that's your distortion. That's all you can hear because you couldn't possibly hear like, I love you. Like, I love you. I'm not upset with you in this moment, and you're making me very angry, like it distorts into like, well, you fucking hate me. You don't even care at all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, that's not.
Yeah, I mean, often it's like you never feel like you're smart enough to be with someone who, is whatever, or you're not pretty enough to be with someone who is whatever, or who believes that you're whatever, all of those things. And, we often choose people who are not that nice to us because that's familiar
And easy.
And, we know what to do with that.
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily have to face some of the impact of the trauma if we kind of stay in some of those things. But I'm watching so many people with BPD challenge that, and I'm so proud. And I'm proud of myself for doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about some of the things that I've heard from BPD babes.
About gaslighting?
Not specifically about gaslighting, but about how to support your stuff with everything that's happening.
Got it. I guess all I wanted to say really is, I guess this kind of wraps into how we're taking care of ourselves too, but let's not forget our critical thinking caps. Step back and be objective, right? That goes with gaslighting too. It's like, is this person gaslighting me or is it something else?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I'm kind of taking care of myself, is I'm putting on a critical thinking hat and being like, all right, is this something I should panic about, or is this something I have the mental wherewithal to research and think critically of this?
Yeah. I like it.
I'm trying.
This first, I asked 2 questions for people with BPD.
Okay.
The first one was, how are you caring for yourself with the current political climate? So let's read through the answers.
Let's do it.
Processing it with my therapist, self-care, journaling, mini spa, naps, going to therapy, taking my meds.
Nice.
Love. Music, and screaming. There has been
a lot of screaming in our house lately.
I was never a person that just like screamed into a pillow or did that whole thing, but recently I've been like there's been something like really cathartic about it, and not screaming at you or screaming because of anything, but just like there's this energy that needs to get the fuck out of my body. So if you can safely do that somewhere, big fan.
Yeah.
Reminding myself that I cannot solve all of the world's problems, but I can show up for my people.
Yes.
Being in community right now is what will save us. No policies, none of that. It's going to be being in community, trying to keep your people safe, trying to keep your people who are, essentially being tracked, it seems like, and trying to be deported. Like, is there a way for you to help keep those people safe? If you can, do it. If there's people that are not feeling safe in schools because of their gender identity, validation. If people are struggling to eat, do whatever you can to try to keep them fed. Okay, leaning into the fight, but with appropriate boundaries.
All
I
right.
love that.
I like that too. I think so often we don't talk about boundaries when it comes to like community outreach and like being, an advocate and an ally. Like I don't think we talk about like boundaries.
Yeah.
Right. Like you can't give everything because then you have nothing. So like I think being like, okay, this is where I'm at. This is what I can give, and respecting your own boundaries, and that is super important. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm starting to take more kids into my practice right now. And that for me is like really powerful in the way that I work with my community.
I'm going to start an egg stand.
You are going to start an egg stand. We're going to be selling our eggs for $2.
Whoa. Yeah, like 2 to 5, depending on how many, I think.
And continuing to give them away to our neighbors and
Also,
such.
yeah.
I can't believe the price of eggs is like $9 a carton. Jesus Christ.
And that's cheap right now. I remember last fucking summer when it was like $13 a 12 pack. It was like $1 an egg.
Yeah. Wild.
Yeah. But yeah,
I have so much clothing that I want to donate to our local clothing bank. So if y'all are getting, going through, if you do a spring cleaning and are going through your stuff, try to find your local clothing bank. Or I just heard about someone who was like getting new shoes and wanted to donate their old shoes. And they were like, Yeah, I literally ended up just putting them on a dumpster near where houseless people are. And they were like, yeah, I saw someone wearing my shoes like a couple weeks later.
Yeah, I used to, if you guys can.
But none of that Goodwill shit. Fuck that.
No, if there's something, like, if you can do, like first, if you guys can find, like, a women's shelter or, like, an LGBTQ plus shelter. Like, I know in the Vancouver, Portland area, I don't know if they're still operating, but there was this place called Martha's Pantry.
Oh, yeah.
And they specifically help those with HIV and AIDS. They do food, clothing, all sorts of stuff. They're very cool. They were in downtown Vancouver for a long time, but I don't know if they still have that lease. And then I think second best is, like, local thrift stores, like small thrift stores that are, like, independently owned by your community members. And
But it's just such a good way of, like, you know, you don't have to have money or even like all that much time to be a part of your community and give back. You can do simple things like just changing the way that you interact with your community. Okay, mostly by limiting how much time I spend reading or watching the news. When I was watching Kennedy's confirmation, I was choosing only the senators I wanted to watch question him instead of the whole 3.5 hours. And also, like, the Late Show guys, you know, finding one of the news guys that also adds some like humor in is so fun. Having faith that if it got really bad, my family would help us leave. Beautiful, wonderful. I love that. I don't think it's bad to talk about backup plans.
Nope.
You know, if that's something that you need. I have a couple of people in my life that I've spoken to about that. And one person has like an actual like plan if they really need to. So talking about how I feel about it once in a while, but trying to balance how much I talk about it. One person said they're struggling and they work in the field. They said it's hard to care for my clients too right now. I'm trying to remember it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another person connecting with my community. Oh, this one's good. Started my gym membership again because all this frustration and fear needs a fucking outlet.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm walking more during the day and that's helpful.
Yeah, anything you can do just to keep yourself, you know, not overflowing with all this excess stuff is important, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And things that actually, like, empty your cup.
This next one has some humor in it, but also truth. They said unrivaled levels of dissonance, masking, and existential dread. If you need to mask and that's what helps you stay safe, 1000% do it.
Yep.
1000% do it.
Yep.
If you are a parent and you're afraid to send your kiddo to school right now and you decide to homeschool and that's what makes you feel safe with your family, 1000% do it. I don't want us to live in fear, and yet there are reasons for some groups of people to be afraid. And like, we have to acknowledge that people can choose to fight out loud or they can choose to fight in quiet.
Absolutely.
And they can choose to not fight at all, right? And there's people that are celebrating and cheering.
Yeah, there are.
Okay.
I think that, like, it's important to remember that idealism is wonderful and important, and it's not something we can hold ourselves or others to. And that not everybody's fight is going to look like yours, and it doesn't make you better than if you're able or comfortable to fight out loud. I think that's so important because I think, like, again, I love idealism. I love the idea of things being great and we all can, like, join and show up to the protest and, you know, really fight for human rights in that very obvious way. Not all of us have the privilege to do so. And there are some of us that cannot get arrested, cannot risk going to jail, and because that means that the entire rest of their life falls down. It's like dominoes, and not everybody has the same stack of dominoes, right? So I think that, like,
you can't go to jail.
No.
Like, being trans, you literally cannot go to jail. I can't go to jail. I'll lose my career. And having borderline.
Yeah.
You know.
But I think that, like, you know, having empathy and grace for the people, like, if, like, I'm speaking for all the people who are quote end quote on our team, right? Having grace and empathy for the way that they show up, especially if it's not the way that you're showing up. Like, every drop in the bucket is important.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, you won't see me at a protest. Like you
No.
just won't, because if something happens and I lose my license to practice, we can't pay for this house. And I'm, that doesn't help in the long run.
Right.
The ability to like be in community with people if more people are struggling to be housed or struggling to, whatever. And maybe some people don't agree with me, and that's okay.
Well, I mean, like in community, not everybody's a fighter. Some people are farmers, some people are builders, some people are organizers, not all of us are. Does that make sense? Like, we all have different roles and they're just as important, so.
GoFundMes are great. I love the GoFundMe.
Yep, direct mutual aids, donating to organizations that you believe in that contribute directly, especially grassroots organizations. If you can cut out as many corporate boys as you can, fucking let's go.
Yeah.
It's little stuff.
All right, last couple of questions before we say goodbye. Relying on friends and community.
Yes.
And then they said taking their supplements, working out. Another person said outdoor time. Yes. Find the sun when you can, sit in it. Journaling, taking their medications, sleeping whenever they need it, going to therapy. Good operational security. I don't know exactly what that means.
Operational security?
Does that mean like putting up a camera?
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Boundaries, collecting resources in case they are removed from online. That's a beautiful idea. I'm going to borrow that. And last one, honestly, having another life I'll be caring for makes me want to be safe for my family's future. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's beautiful.
Too.
All right, y'all. We hope you're staying safe. And if there's anything that we can do in community with our BPD folks to support, please reach out with ideas, comments, thoughts. Reach out and let me know if you want to come on the podcast and talk about it as well. Things are weird right now, but I've got hope for us. I'm holding hope for us as a community. And let's avoid the gaslighting. Yeah.
No more gaslighting.
Hopefully
it doesn't help anyone.
Yeah, hopefully everyone has more of an understanding of gaslighting now. I feel like I do. So, all right, we'll talk to you next time.